Jerry feels like he's dying and everything he does is an absolute hell. He's pulled another all-nighter working on his IAs and his stomach and his entire body feels dead. Even after all of this effort, he's still behind. He's trying to catch up with his classes and only ends up procrastinating on a daily with his studies. Jerry is burned out. Bjorn. From the moment he wakes up, Bjorn already has his day planned out for him. First, eat a quick breakfast. Next, quick exercise. And then study for some hours in a state of flow. After some intense studying, he goes out for lunch with friends. It's a weekend, so why not? Come Monday and he has his stoichiometry test, but he's ready for it. After his classes, he spends a little bit of time studying and then hangs out with his friends. And when the studying's over, he bikes home for a good 30 minutes, enjoying the scenic route. He can't believe he managed to survive the IB for this long, while also having all this free time with perfect mental health. Hello everybody, my name is Joaquin Revello. I'm a current Wharton Business and Engineering dual degree student, and I got a perfect 45 in the IB in May of 2021. So let's talk a little bit about the IB burning you out and how the IB can be very stressful. Everyone was always coming up to me telling me how the IB is gonna suck my soul, how I'm gonna die in this process, how I won't get any sleep at all. So not only was I told this stuff by the seniors at my school, but I also kept seeing all of these type of posts on Reddit. The burnout is real. Senior year is absolute hell. I had severe burnout towards the end of IB2. Damn me, I can't take it anymore. It's nice to vent after a while. However, what if I told you that with the correct set of strategies, all of this can actually be avoided? In fact, you can thrive during the IB, as I did, get a perfect 45 while also enjoying the time that you need to enjoy with your friends and family. Like for example, I spent the entire day of Sunday skiing with my family and friends during what is known as the busiest IB season in November and December leading up to the May 2021 exams. So you can be like Bjorn and you want to stick until the end of this video because a few of these tips will radically improve your life. And as I like to say all the time, if you get one great idea from one of these videos that completely changes the trajectory of your life, not only in the IB, but also in university and beyond, then the few minutes you spend watching this entertaining video is really all you need and is definitely a good return on investment. It's definitely worth it. And as a bonus, I also fill my videos with tons of Easter eggs, which are small little codes that you can type into the link in the description down below. Go to grizzly.com/Easter egg and you get your secret Easter egg, which is a secret infographic or training session. So go check that out. They're scattered throughout this video and let's get right into the tips. So I want to start off with tip number 1 by stating a mindset shift. And I learned this mindset shift through one of my friends at my school. Now look, I had a good friend in high school who had basically the exact same classes that I had. Now, despite doing nearly the same things, right, the same classes, which should theoretically be the exact same amount of work, myself, I was basically not burned out at all while my friend was constantly exhausted. Burnout is not a result of working more hours or working longer hours or doing more stuff. Instead, it is the absence of proper recovery. And with that being said, burnout is actually not a real thing. It is not a diagnosable mental illness. Instead, the way I like to view it, which is somewhat simplified, mind you, this is not the actual scientific way to view it, but it's helped me in my own life. I like to think of burnout as just a case of immense dopamine depletion. And if you understand how dopamine works, you know that it is a finite but renewable resource, which means that eventually your dopamine levels will return up to baseline, which implies that with a proper rest and recovery and not overshooting your dopamine levels every single day or consistently or at a very high interval, without doing that and while having enough periods of rest and recovery, you can actually go back up to a normal state of dopamine. And this right here is how you overcome burnout, by understanding how to clearly rest and recover. And look, if you want to work long hours like I do, like myself, I work maybe like 12 to 14 hours every single day just because I love doing work itself. If you want to work those long hours, there is still a way to work 12 to 14 hours without being burned out, which is what I'm going to get to in just a second. And with that being said, you just found yourself an Easter egg. Congratulations. This is actually an excellent one on last minute exam cramming. Believe it or not, there actually is a methodology to maximize your cramming if you end up in that situation. In fact, I don't recommend people end up in that situation, but sometimes it happens for whatever reason. Check this one out. It's called #Grizzly49. Okay, #Grizzly49 with capital letters, all one word, no space. So #Grizzly49, capital letters, type that in, grizzly.com/Easter egg, and you can get your goodies there. So I'm gonna specify how to burn out even if you wanna work very long hours, but let me remind you this, that you don't actually need to work long hours every single day. In fact, I recommend my students work 4 to 5 hours every single day. Like that's really all you need to do. In fact, there's some research that shows that for individuals who aren't trained in mindfulness, which I'll explain in just a second, you can really only take up to 4 to 5 hours of information before you start to get diminishing marginal returns. If you want to increase that amount, I found through my own personal experience that mindfulness training, meaning meditation for 30 to an hour every single day, allows you to build up that threshold. And that's really what I've been doing over the past 2 years. So really there are 2 different types of strategies here. Number 1 is workplace strategies while you're actually working to avoid burnout. And then number 2 is just recovery strategies. All right, so number 1, workplace strategies. So essentially burnout can be represented by levels of dopamine depletion. Therefore, you want to avoid dips in your dopamine. So what I recommend to avoid those dips is to avoid spikes to begin with, because remember, dopamine is a finite but renewable resource. Hence, while you're doing work, you want to remove anything that can spike up your dopamine. So there's a few things that do this. Number 1, multitasking, okay? First of all, you cannot multitask. Do not try to multitask. It is one of the biggest mistakes I see students, I see everybody make is multitasking. Your brain is not designed to multitask. In fact, they did a study that showed that when you multitask, you lose your IQ by 10 points. And one of the ways that you're multitasking the most, and most students don't actually realize that this is multitasking, but is listening to music. So what you want to do to avoid burnout is to avoid sensory overload, which essentially means adding so much stimulus to all your senses that it spikes up your dopamine. It, in many cases, overwhelms it. So I challenge you for 1 week, okay? So for the next 7 days, I want you to not multitask. So when you sit down to do work, only do work. Don't be listening to music. Don't try to do some chill step in the background or some rap or anything like that. Just sit down with silence and do the work. Very rarely do I work with students who the only thing they do is sit down without distraction, without anything, no music, no nothing. They sit down and they only do focused work. Rarely have I ever seen those students burn out. The students that I work with that are almost always burned out are those who try to multitask, or those who try to do a million different things, or those who never sleep and don't have the proper recovery, which we'll talk about in just a second. But essentially what you want to do, number 1, is avoid sensory overload. So music does that. Constantly switching between tasks, because that's what multitasking is, does that. A lot of caffeine as well spikes up your dopamine. And really just anything that layers onto the already experience is something that you want to be avoiding. Okay, number 2 is proper recovery strategies. All right, there's 2 parts to recovery. The first of which is short-term breaks, meaning that every single time you finish a work session, a state of flow, you get up and you take a break. So if you're not already working in chunks of 45 minutes to an hour, or maybe even 25 minutes if you want to do Pomodoro, start working in chunks of 45 minutes in a state of flow. And then after those 45 minutes, get up for a solid like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then just walk around. And then again, your point, the entire point of these breaks is to take in less sensory input. So what I like to do many times in my breaks is just get up, walk around a little bit, and then just look out the window for 10 minutes. The point here is to cut the deluge of constant influx of information. The last thing in the world you want to do during these study breaks is go on social media or go on YouTube, because that's a distraction. That's not a proper recovery. And if you have to respond to texts from your friends, do that quickly, right? It shouldn't take more than 1 to 2 minutes. Do that quickly, then get off your phone and then just look outside. When I started doing this changed my life. It really did, because every single time I would take a break, I would just sit here and then just go on YouTube and then get back to work. Do not do that. Get up from your chair, walk around, and you'll be very thankful because of it, okay? Number 2 is longer forms of recovery. All right, I want you to schedule into your calendar time that you're gonna actually have fun. Most IB students don't do this. And then what they end up doing instead is that during the day, during the week, during their chemistry course, their math HL, math AA, physics, all this type of stuff, instead of actually focusing in class, they spend all their time on social media distracted. All right, I believe it was Jim Rohn that said that when he's working, he's thinking of the beach. And then when he's at the beach, he's thinking of working, okay? That is absolutely not what you wanna do. You wanna do only one thing in a state of flow. So when you're recovering, recover only in a state of flow. When you're sprinting, meaning you're sitting down in a state of focused flow, only do that in a state of flow. So what I want you to do is I want you to actually make your recovery fun. Go out of your way to do something fun. And what's the best way to make sure that this happens? Actually schedule it into your calendar. And this right here, again, is another strategy that just completely changed my life. Okay, I was watching a football match, or soccer as you guys call it here in the US and Canada, of an Argentina match. I believe this was in 2019, so right when Scaloni came. Long story short, after watching that game of football, I realized something profound, that as soon as the time finishes, right? As soon as the 90 minutes are hit, the game is over, all right? You can't spend any more time trying to score a goal. You can't do anything else. You can't argue, like the game is over, it's done. So then I asked myself, when is my game over? When is my day done? So this is literally what I did. I set a timer on my computer for, what was it, like 8 p.m., something like that. And then at 8 p.m., the game was over. The day was done. After 8 p.m., I could not do any more schoolwork. I could not do any more IB work. I could not do any more IA. nothing. It was over. And if you have cold turkey, you know that you can actually set a mode on cold turkey, or even with the new Microsoft Windows or that software over there, you can actually set the mode to cut your computer so you can't actually access your computer after a certain period of time. That was profoundly helpful because it added an extra constraint on my time. Instead of telling myself that, hey, I'm just gonna do work until 2 in the morning and just see what happens, which was my mentality going into the IB, I learned very early on, and remember, this was 2019, so this was right at the beginning of my IB journey. I learned very early on, instead of just working into the night and then hoping that eventually I'd get it done, I learned very early on that if I did not get it done by 8 p.m., it was not getting done. Like, end of story. There was no discussion at all. So now this added what I like to call bomb time, which is an actual incentive for me to do work, an actual time limit, a due date for me to finish the task, right? If you've ever noticed that the night that you're procrastinating on that big IA or that big EE, that's when you're most productive. Well, you can actually mimic that same behavior or that same tendency of humans to procrastinate by setting a type of deadline such as this one. So instead of the deadline being at 6 in the morning, which is going to deplete you and then screw up your sleep schedule, and then you're just going to be screwed for the rest of the week in terms of energy, I set the deadline to be at 8 p.m. That changed my life so profoundly. I strongly recommend you give it a go. All right, and then finally, the last aspect to this recovery session is to find some time to actually pause. All right, do nothing. Okay, and this could be just a few days. Like my brother and I, we went on a hiking trip up a mountain not too long ago, and then we just spent a few hours meditating, right, doing absolutely nothing. We had no cell phones, no nothing, no distractions. We kind of just sat there and looked at the stars. You'd be surprised at how effective that is to really clear your mind, reduce stress, and more importantly, allow you to perform when the time comes. So overall, burnout is not a real thing, okay? It's not a diagnosable condition, which means what? Which means that with the correct set of strategies, you can always avoid it, all right? I can't even remember the last time I was burned out. I remember in high school, I would get burned out sometimes at the beginning, and then I started adopting these strategies. I started really staying productive, taking the proper recovery, right? Removing all these forms of layering that just pile up. And then simply by doing that, I never really got burned out, right? I felt tired at times, maybe I felt a little bit exhausted a few days, but to remedy that, I just took a little bit longer on the rest of recovery of actually doing nothing. That's where mindfulness is so powerful. Mindfulness really forces you to be in the present, which quote unquote is doing nothing, right? You're not thinking about some future event. You're not on social media or nothing. You're none of that. You're just completely in the moment. That's what I recommend. That's one of the best forms of recovery, if not the best form of recovery. Do that as much as possible. You'll destroy burnout. You'll never feel like that again. Like I have not felt that ever since high school, ever. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions at all, drop them in the comment section down below. I'm more than happy to help you. And until next time, stay grizzly. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.